Russia has hailed an unexpected milestone at the G20 summit in Delhi, where the world's biggest economies issued a joint declaration that avoided condemning Moscow for its war against Ukraine. The statement, which denounced using force for territorial gain but also acknowledged different views and assessments of the situation, was seen as a diplomatic victory for Russia and a disappointment for Ukraine, which was not invited to the summit. Ensure you stay well informed by subscribing to our channel, SLANT News. We provide the latest, most credible news. Thank you for considering us. The G20 summit, which took place on September 9 and 10, 2023, in India's capital, was attended by leaders from 19 countries and the European Union, as well as representatives from the African Union, which was inducted as a new permanent member. The summit focused on issues such as climate change, biofuels, global health, and food security, but also addressed the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, which has escalated since Russia invaded and annexed Crimea in 2022. On the first day of the summit, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced that consensus had been reached on how to phrase the Ukraine section of the final declaration, which saw last year's direct criticism of Russia watered down. The declaration stated that the G20 leaders deplore the human suffering and negative added impacts of the war in Ukraine with regard to global food and energy security, and called on states to refrain from the threat or use of force to seek territorial acquisition. However, it also noted that there were different views and assessments of the situation, and urged dialogue and cooperation to resolve the crisis. On the second day of the summit, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov praised the joint declaration as a milestone, and said that Russia had not expected such an outcome. He said that Russia was ready to defend its wording of the text and that the Global South was no longer willing to be lectured by the West. He also said that Russia was open to dialogue with Ukraine and other parties, but insisted that Moscow's security interests must be respected. On the other hand, Ukraine expressed its dissatisfaction with the G20 statement, saying that it was nothing to be proud of, and that it failed to hold Russia accountable for its aggression. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said that the statement was a step back from last year's Bali declaration, and that it did not reflect the reality on the ground. He also said that Ukraine would continue to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity with the support of its allies. Apart from the Ukraine issue, the G20 summit also achieved some agreements on other topics, such as climate change and biofuels. The leaders endorsed a plan to reduce methane emissions by 30% by 2030, and agreed to increase their contributions to the Green Climate Fund. They also agreed to promote sustainable biofuels as an alternative to fossil fuels and to ensure food security for all. However, some environmental groups criticized the summit for not committing to phasing out coal and other fossil fuels completely. Some experts and analysts shared their views on the outcome of the G20 summit and its implications for global politics. Here are some quotes from them. The G20 statement on Ukraine is a compromise that reflects India's role as a mediator between different blocs. India wanted to avoid alienating Russia or China, but also maintain its ties with the US and Europe. India also wanted to showcase its leadership in the Global South and make the G20 more inclusive by inviting the African Union. Rajesh Basra, Professor of International Relations at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. The G20 statement on Ukraine is a setback for Ukraine and a win for Russia. It shows that Russia has successfully exploited the divisions within the G20 and weakened the resolve of some countries to confront Moscow. It also shows that some countries are more interested in economic cooperation than in defending democratic values. Michael McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to Russia and director of the Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies at Stanford University. The G20 statement on Ukraine is a reflection of the changing balance of power in the world. It shows that Russia and China have gained more influence and leverage over some countries, especially those in Asia and Africa. It also shows that the US and Europe have lost some of their credibility and clout after their withdrawal from Afghanistan and their failure to deliver on their climate pledges. Ian Bremmer, president and founder of Eurasia Group, a political risk consultancy. The G20 summit and its statement on Ukraine have significant impacts and relevance for various actors and issues. Some of them are as follows. For Russia, the summit was a success that boosted its confidence and legitimacy in the international arena. It also gave Russia an opportunity to present its position and interests on the Ukraine crisis, and to seek dialogue and cooperation with other countries. However, it also exposed Russia's isolation and hostility from some of its G20 partners, especially the US and the EU, who still impose sanctions and pressure on Moscow. For Ukraine, the summit was a disappointment that undermined its hopes and expectations for more support and solidarity from the international community. It also increased Ukraine's vulnerability and insecurity in the face of Russia's aggression and expansionism. However, it also motivated Ukraine to strengthen its resilience and resistance against Russia, and to seek more assistance and cooperation from its allies, especially NATO and the EU. For India, the summit was an opportunity to showcase its leadership and diplomacy in hosting and chairing the G20 meeting. It also demonstrated India's role as a bridge builder and a mediator between different blocs and regions. However, it also revealed India's challenges and dilemmas in balancing its relations with various countries, especially Russia, China, the US, and the EU. For the African Union, the summit was a milestone that marked its induction as a new permanent member of the G20. It also enhanced the AU's visibility and voice in global governance and decision-making. However, it also increased the AU's responsibilities and expectations to contribute to global issues and challenges, such as climate change, health, and security. The G20 summit and its statement on Ukraine elicited various reactions from different stakeholders, public figures, or those affected by the news. Some of them are as follows. US President Joe Biden said that he welcomed the G20 statement on Ukraine as a strong message to Russia that using force for territorial gain was unacceptable. He also said that he had a frank conversation with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on the sidelines of the summit, and urged him to de-escalate tensions and respect Ukraine's sovereignty. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said that she supported the G20 statement on Ukraine as a balanced document that reflected the diversity of views within the group. She also said that she had a constructive meeting with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the margins of the summit and praised him for his leadership and mediation efforts. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said that he endorsed the G20 statement on Ukraine as a positive outcome that promoted dialogue and cooperation among all parties. He also said that he had a friendly exchange with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov during the summit, and reaffirmed China's strategic partnership and coordination with Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said that he rejected the G20 statement on Ukraine as a weak document that failed to condemn Russia for its aggression. He also said that he had a disappointing phone call with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi after the summit, and expressed his dissatisfaction with India's role as the host country. The G20 summit in Delhi was held amid rising tensions and violence in Ukraine, where Russia has been waging a war since 2022. The conflict began when Russia invaded and annexed Crimea, a peninsula in southern Ukraine, in February 2022. Following a popular uprising that ousted pro-Russian President Viktor Yanukovych. The annexation was widely condemned by most countries as a violation of international law and triggered sanctions and pressure from the US, the EU, and other countries. Since then, Russia has also supported separatist rebels in eastern Ukraine, who have declared two self-proclaimed republics in Donetsk and Luhansk regions. The war has killed more than 15,000 people, displaced more than 2 million people, and caused humanitarian crises in both sides of the border. The G20 summit in Delhi may have some implications for the future of the Ukraine crisis and global politics. Some of them are as follows. The summit may create some space for dialogue and diplomacy among the parties involved in the conflict, especially Russia, Ukraine, the US, and Europe. It may also encourage some confidence-building measures or humanitarian gestures to ease tensions and suffering on the ground. The summit may also increase some pressure or incentives for Russia to change its behavior or policy towards Ukraine. It may also prompt some countries to reconsider their stance or strategy towards Russia, either by increasing their support or sanctions, or by seeking more engagement or cooperation. The summit may also affect the balance of power and influence in the world, especially among the G20 members. It may also reveal the strengths and weaknesses of different blocs and regions, such as the West, the East, the Global South, and Africa. The G20 summit in Delhi was a significant event that addressed various global issues and challenges, but also highlighted the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and its impact on global security and stability. The summit resulted in a joint declaration that avoided condemning Russia for its war against Ukraine, but also denounced using force for territorial gain. The statement was praised by Russia as a milestone, but criticized by Ukraine as a setback. The summit also showed the diversity of views and interests among the G20 members, as well as their role and influence in global governance and decision-making. The summit may have some consequences for the future of the Ukraine crisis and global politics, either by creating opportunities for dialogue and cooperation, or by increasing tensions and competition.